In today's biased news, more shootings in the US, chaos in Sudan, and a global debt crisis looms on the horizon. In tragic but unsurprising news, the US has seen a new wave of shootings in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Texas, in which 10 people have lost their lives. The three events took place on Monday and Tuesday. The victims included children as young as toddlers. This is yet another episode in America's continuous failure at dealing with deep societal problems that allow or push people to carry out such atrocities. The conversation has centered around calls for gun control, with President Biden calling for a tightening of firearm laws as Republicans continue to block any attempts at doing so. In the usual macabre commentary, police commissioners said, "We have absolutely no idea why this happened. The killing spree seems to bear the characteristics of a lot of random mass shootings that happen in the United States." The US has seen over 340 mass shootings so far in 2023, more than one mass shooting every single day. As a result, the US has the most per capita gun deaths of any large high-income country. Several other countries globally have high gun ownership rates, yet far fewer mass acts of violence than the United States. This reflects a societal defect of American life, rooted in lack of access to mental health care, an absence of common-sense gun ownership legislation, and the general precarity of Americans, both in terms of cost of living and quality of life. In addition, mass shootings account for less than 1% of gun violence in the US, signaling a deep crisis with no real political solution proposed by the major bipartisan hegemon. Intense battles have broken out in Sudan as the army clashes with paramilitary RSF to cut off their supply routes. The conflict, triggered by disputes over a transition to civilian rule, has led to daily fighting in Khartoum, ethnically motivated killings in Darfur, and the threat of prolonged civil war. Thus far, ceasefire attempts have failed. According to the latest United Nations statistics, the conflict has resulted in significant displacement, with nearly 2.8 million people forced to leave their homes, including approximately 650,000 refugees seeking safety in neighboring countries. The UN Human Rights Council will hold an urgent meeting, requested by Pakistan, to discuss the burning of a Quran outside a mosque in Sweden. The meeting, focused on the rise of religious hatred, is expected to take place later this week. The incident occurred during a protest authorized by Stockholm police, and has drawn condemnation from multiple countries, with Morocco recalling its ambassador to Sweden indefinitely. International reactions include protests in Baghdad and criticism from Turkish President Erdogan, who has promised to block Sweden's accession to NATO. A new study reveals that the number of women dying within a year after pregnancy more than doubled in the US between 1999 and 2019. The research, which excluded COVID-19 pandemic data, shows that the maternal mortality rate per 100,000 live births rose from 12.7 to 32.2 in this 20-year period. The highest number of deaths was recorded among Black women, followed by American Indian and Alaska Native women. Structural racism and lack of access to healthcare are significant factors contributing to this alarming trend. The US has the highest maternal mortality rate among wealthy nations, yet again making the US number one in the worst possible way. In debt news, the Paris summit, hosted by Macron on June 24th, aimed to address the debt crisis affecting the developing world. Zambia, the first African country to default on its sovereign debt in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, received approval for the restructuring of $6.3 billion of its loans from its major lenders, including China and Western nations. The debt crisis has become a global concern as many low-income developing countries are in debt distress. Even major economies like the US are expected to have high public debt levels. While there is no evidence of a contagion causing a global crisis yet, economists stress the need for richer countries to act quickly and involve newer creditors, like China and the private sector, in debt restructuring deals to facilitate a faster economic recovery and avoid a repeat of past debt crises. The debt situation was compounded by the 2022 Russia-Ukraine conflict, leading to an increase in global commodity and food prices. As a result, about 60% of low-income developing countries are facing debt restructuring. The 1980s debt crisis serves as a cautionary example, in which many less developed countries agreed to spending cuts in exchange for debt restructuring, leading to a lost decade of lower income levels. And to end on a positive note, a Japanese research team is making progress on a groundbreaking medication that may enable people to grow new teeth. Clinical trials for this promising drug are set to begin in July 2024, with the aim of making it available for general use by 2030. The drug targets individuals who lack a full set of adult teeth due to congenital factors, specifically a condition called anodontia, affecting around 1% of the population. Don't think this means you can stop brushing your teeth, though. We're watching you. That's all for today. We'll be back day after tomorrow with more news. As always, you can support the show and get the news in text form a few hours early by becoming a patron at patreon.com/firstthought.